Hello, my health freedom loving friends. Misty Carlfeld here with Health Freedom Idaho. I'm here with Thea. She is the mother of Daniel Jr., and her story is something that, honestly, I've just come away with the understanding that CPS has reached a new low. We know that CPS in Idaho is way out of control. CPS in Idaho is literally medically kidnapping children. And that's what's happened here with Daniel Jr. So you're going to want to hear the story for a couple of reasons. Thea needs help raising money. She needs an attorney, and you're going to hear why. I mean, just when you think things cannot get worse, they do. And it really, we are called as Christians to help our neighbor, right? We are called as Christians to help people in need. And that's why I feel called right now, even in the midst of my own family suffering with my grandfather passing yesterday. It's so important for you to hear Thea's story and give her the help that she needs, that I'm doing this today, no matter what else is going on, because her son needs to be returned to her. Now, I'm not a doctor and I'm not an attorney. I only have the experience that I've had and the documents before me and a mother before me telling me very similar stories to the stories I've already heard so many times, except there's so much more. I mean, the stress that this has brought to Thea, Daniel's mother, has brought on a stroke. And now having to push through the stroke and heal from that, and also still try to get her son back. That's the thing that I've been trying to raise awareness about for so long, is the stress that this brings to families. When CPS intervenes without cause, and I mean real cause, they cause harm. They cause harm to families, they cause harm to mothers, they cause harm to fathers, they cause harm to children. And you're going to hear that today. So buckle up, folks. It's not going to be the easiest story to hear. It isn't. And it may, for some of you, maybe this is the first time you're hearing of the devastation that CPS can bring, and you're not going to want to believe it. And trust me when I say, I've been doing this long enough to say that you will want to find some other reason, because you won't want to believe that CPS can be so corrupt and cause so much destruction, and that you and I are funding it. That you're going to want to try to find some other reason. And like I said, I don't know Thea as well as I've known some of the other parents that I've interviewed, but I've done it enough to know that Thea's story rings true. So you should take a listen and then find what it is in your heart to do, and try not to look away, even when it's excruciatingly painful and beyond belief that our government programs are taking part and are complicit and even instigating and driving home some of the worst atrocities that are happening to American families and even Idaho families. And remember, this is a for-profit organization. Just because it's under the umbrella of the Health and Welfare Department does not mean that it's a nonprofit. This is a for-profit organization. And how they make their money is by taking children. And they make more money when they take your child and rehome your child. And they especially make more money if your child has any kind of handicap, needs any kind of medication, needs any kind of therapy, needs reasons to go to the doctor. They make even more money from those federal dollars. And guess where those federal dollars are coming from? You and me, our Social Security fund, is paying for everything you're going to hear today. And I preface all of that because this story is hard to hear. It's hard to swallow. It's hard to know we're all participating in it. And that's why we're called even more to do something to help Thea and Daniel reunite. Let's get Daniel Jr. home. Thea, thank you so much for pushing past all that you have going on today. I have things going on, you have things going on, but sometimes what's got to be done is got to be done, and we're both making it happen. You, in spite of the stroke that you recently had, dear, how are you doing?
I'm recovering.
Well, that's good. I'm imagining it's hard to recover under this kind of emotional stress.
It is, but Daniel's my son and I won't give up.
Yeah, I understand that. So when people are watching, please understand it takes her a little longer to form what she's wanting to say. So be patient, because she's obviously had a stroke and is pushing through that. Thea, let's give a little bit of an overview before we get into the details. Now, correct me if I'm wrong. You and I have had a little bit of a chance to discuss this, but it sounds like your mother was concerned about Daniel Jr.'s father, keeping Daniel Jr. from you.
Yes.
And that you hadn't been able to speak with him, talk with him. He was in Daniel Sr.'s care because you were actually receiving care and treatment and going to different doctors for, was it rheumatoid arthritis?
Correct.
Yes. So you needed help from your son's dad to take care of his son while you were getting treatment for your rheumatoid arthritis.
Yeah, and we agreed that he would take him temporarily.
Right.
And he wanted to take him for a year. And he was having problems in taking care of our son.
Right. Because it sounds like he's autistic or on the spectrum in some way due to a vaccine injury.
Yeah, he at 19 months regressed after a vaccine. And at 3.5, I was told he was socially and mentally unable to communicate. And then the doctor told me he was on the spectrum. And I was like, what spectrum? And that was in 2009. And I learned a lot about the spectrum.
Right. Right. And so just from this, overview of the story before we get into all the details, your mother was concerned because Daniel Sr. was keeping Daniel Jr. from you. You actually didn't even know where he was. Father wasn't communicating with you. So it was actually your mother who reported to CPS, right?
Yeah, she made a call because I visited her and she was concerned back in March. I didn't know where he was. I hired a private investigator. I put several posts on Facebook asking people if you saw him or Dad's truck to let me know where they were so I could do a welfare check and maybe get some court documents to have him served.
Right, right. And so CPS gets involved. And long story short, but we'll get into the details. They find your son with his dad, and they find that he's in a not very good situation. And they take your son. And so rather than giving your son back to you, they decide here in Idaho, while you're in Arizona, decide to keep your son. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
And we've heard this kind of a story. I mean, I haven't shared every story that I've heard online because not every parent wants to go public. But it happens multiple times where they take a child in Idaho, the other parent lives in another state, and then they just refuse to give the child to the other competent parent. Well, they don't want to let go of that funding, I would imagine. So now they're in this predicament where they actually have a smarter than average mother here who's not going to just lay down and take it. I think a lot of parents get overwhelmed. They get marred up in the system. They get so heartbroken and devastated that it's hard to put one foot in front of the other. And they certainly don't have people to reach out to. to help with funding and things like that, and then they lose their children, and then they adopt them out to another family, and boom, a $4,000 bonus on federal bonus, right? It's atrocious. So so I hope people understand that at this point, when Thea is telling me this story, I'm like, okay, like everyone else, I want to know what I'm missing. What do I not know as to why they wouldn't give Daniel Jr. back to Thea? But before we get to that, let's talk about the report. I'm going to share this screen. Oh, actually, while I work on this screen, Thea, tell us a little bit about yourself, because you used to be in the military, right? So tell us a little bit about that.
I was in the Navy and was in communications and telecommunications, computers. And I actually had a vaccine injury documented and damage to my liver. So in boot camp, they give you lots of vaccinations, and I was very sick and recovered, but still had damage. And at 19, I've had lots of issues with my liver.
I'm so sorry. I mean, I've heard so many of these stories. I know that the COVID jab has really helped to raise awareness about this, but the average person doesn't understand that when a person joins the military, they're agreeing to take whatever the military tells them to take. And we have so many people who have volunteered to serve our country. Oh, hang on. Sorry about that. I need to quiet that. That are vaccine injured because they've taken every vaccine the government has told them to take, and they're vaccine injured. So you were vaccine injured while in the military, and then your son even had a response. So now you're dealing with, and you and I have spoken, that we both have spoken at Autism One, right?
I was actually a guest. I didn't speak, but I have spoken in several wellness arenas about the damage. And also, I was told that when Daniel had his reaction, it could have been genetic. And also that if I wanted to continue to vaccine him, to do delayed vaccines. And I decided after that mess, he had to be given shots to open his airways after he received the vaccine, and it was a nightmare.
Oh my
And
goodness.
so I stopped, and ever since then, I've worked with Dr. John Gray. He wrote Women Are From Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus.
Mm-hmm.
And he helped me with a protocol for Daniel, well, along with many of my amazing colleagues, to help recover Daniel. And today he's higher functioning, and he's like a little genius, and he's so loving and caring, but he does not like his boundaries to be overstepped and personal space violated. So I know he was going through some things with his dad and stepmom, and it was stressful. And children with special needs don't deal well with stress.
Right. You're right. And I don't have a child on the spectrum or dealing with autism, so being a speaker at those events was really powerful for me. I spoke about what to do if CPS comes to your door, which is more of my wheelhouse. But as you know, I was fully immersed then with parents who are dealing with children on the spectrum and working so hard to recover them. It becomes literally everything the parent is doing to recover their child. It's a full-time, 24 hours a day, no break job. And so, I mean, my hat's off to you that you were doing that and also dealing with your own rheumatoid arthritis. I have an autoimmune disease myself, and I can only imagine trying to give that kind of care and while dealing with your own pain. I'm sure that that was overwhelming, and my hat's off to you, friend, for doing all that you did, all the research you did to recover your son.
Yeah, Dr. Ben Lynch really helped me along the way. He operates SHEI in the Institute, and he also helped me with my own health challenges. And along the way, Dr. Amen Clinics helped me a lot in the education and knowledge to help myself when I had a concussion from an attack. So I was dealing with rheumatoid arthritis, a concussion, and a load of stress.
Yeah.
So, and then this caught me off guard and sent me down stroke alley, which I
Yeah.
didn't expect. But thank goodness for my healthier lifestyle, I was on the right path. It didn't do as much damage as it should have technically. So I'm thankful I'm here and able to fight for reform and Daniel's safety and help others if they're put in this situation or when they are in it.
Right. That's awesome. And sometimes I'm telling you, it's like Christine. They poked the wrong mama bear, and now she's out there, drafting legislation and pushing it forward. So I have a feeling you'll do great things too. But we've got to first get your boy home and safe and sound with his mother. So, my understanding is you needed to move to Arizona because of your arthritis. You were in less pain there. Is that correct?
Yeah, the elevation, the temperature. I couldn't get to a specialist in Boise at the VA, so I agreed to come out of state, and it was supposed to be temporary and go back to Idaho, which I love Idaho. But things kind of took a turn,
Yeah.
and now I'm here for occupational therapy and physical therapy and to follow up with my doctors here. And as you know, rheumatoid arthritis, being in cold weather, doesn't really help the body.
Yeah.
And so it started to get better a few weeks ago before the news of CPS and then the stroke.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my goodness. And if I understand right, Dad was in agreement to you going to Arizona
Yes,
and taking Daniel.
yes. Well,
So,
he left Idaho and went to Michigan and then came back to Idaho.
mm,
So there was a time period he left before I left.
okay. Okay. So then you were at a place where you needed to go somewhere else for a different treatment for your rheumatoid arthritis. And that's when you asked Daniel Sr., the dad, to take care of Daniel Jr. while you were getting specific treatment. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had asked him months before I needed to get treatment, and he had wanted custody of Daniel last year in May, and we went to court. And because of COVID and everything going on, and Dad wanted to move out of state, the judge said Mom is probably better suited to take care for Daniel. And so Dad left the state last May, and then I left in around end of August, September.
Okay. Okay. So now he's taking care of your son. Now, does he understand all the things that you do, the healthy eating you do, the medication protocol he's on? the learning about his boundaries, understanding his boundaries and what sets him off and what doesn't. Does dad work with him the same way you do and understand what needs to be done?
Unfortunately not. He doesn't want to accept Daniel's demands and needs for
Mhm.
his health and his well-being,
Right.
especially his mental health. Stepdad and I were taking him to therapy and family therapy, how to deal with Daniel becoming a teenager.
Yes.
And because a lot of things change. And then also his sisters would go with us to learn more of how to help Daniel. And Daniel got really sad and blue when dad moved out of state. He become a little harder to handle and he really wanted to be with his dad.
Oh, I'm sorry. It is hard. It's hard. All those transitions are hard for any child, let alone a child who's on the spectrum. I mean, my understanding, not that I can totally relate, but my understanding from my friends who do deal with these things would tell me like you can't do change. You can't do big change, and especially something like dad leaving would be a hard trigger. And then you all moved and everything, and then COVID. So that's a big change for his schooling, right?
Yeah, he had a really hard time adjusting to COVID until we got him to accept online schooling would be best for him and do activities outside of the house as much as we could. And we had enough stability and space to do those things and travel. He loves to travel. We go to City of Rocks and Moab and Zion, and we went to the Grand Canyon and the Arches. And so we gave him plenty of camping experiences and social activities like um, cooking. And he, had a job to cook once a week dinner, family board games, Uno, rock painting. We made do with what we could during COVID. And in July last year, he went to go see dad for summer for 3 weeks. And when he came back, he really wanted to be with dad on an everyday basis, asking me. And so I felt it was time for him to be with his dad. And since I was going to get care, it kind of worked out for everyone.
Right. That makes sense. So it seems like it all makes sense. And you're moving forward with your treatment, and he's going to have his time with dad. Dad wants to have him. Things are lining up. So, where do things start going wrong?
Oh my goodness. Uh, so Daniel went with dad, and then he wasn't getting his medications, no therapy, no schooling, and there was a lot of tension with stepmom and no therapy. If there had been therapy, Daniel and stepmom and dad could have found ways to cope with Daniel's changes and new routines.
Yeah, okay. All right. So then, what was their home life like? I mean, I was kind of looking through the police report and it looked like they were even homeless and maybe living in a hotel. I mean, where did that come across?
His past job was a hotel manager where he lived. So
Oh,
he would live on site and do management and stuff like that. But that was their way of life. And I learned that Daniel had his own hotel room and really wasn't being attended to. And dad wouldn't give me the new address. And that's when things became really hard. I believe an incident happened where stepmom called the police on Daniel, and then Daniel got in trouble and had to complete some things. And one of those things was to be in school. And so dad was forced to put him in school for 3 days, and then they left. And Daniel had called me and said they were back in Idaho, and I wanted the address. I wanted to speak to Daniel. He wasn't calling me consistently and not on Zooms that we scheduled. And then I wanted dad's address, but he would not tell me.
Okay, so when it says here in this report, this is the CP petition for hearing under Child Protective Act. When it says that, let's see, it says that the Nampa police detective, it says that he was living at this budget hotel or something. Let me find this.
Well, from what I understand, and I still don't know the whole story, Dad hadn't been working. Dad wasn't giving therapy, and there were some things that the court had ordered Daniel complete. And I even asked for Daniel to come see me on Easter so that I could get him back and then file paperwork to keep him.
Right.
And then Dad kept trying to get me to kind of get me back to Idaho while I was getting treatments. And I told him, I can't get there. Let's fly Daniel to me. And he refused. So he kept trying to get me to go to Idaho. And I told him that Daniel can come to me since it was hard to travel.
Oh, okay. So this is where Mr. Miller did acknowledge they could no longer stay at the Budget Inn motel where he was working. So did he lose his job?
I think he lost his job before they went to the Budget Inn.
Okay.
He had stated that they were staying there on funding from some program to stay in housing. And then Dad told me he was waiting for welfare and that he got a place at Canyon Apartments. And I had so many stories, but I was sending Dad money.
Right.
And then they said that he didn't have anywhere else to go.
Okay, so looking through this. Okay. So he was homeless. This report is saying they were not giving the medication like they needed to. Dad felt very overwhelmed. It says Mr. Miller stated that he has had primary custody of Daniel Jr. since late 2021 and that meeting the child's needs has been, quote, stressful. And so, I mean, the obvious question is if he's stressed in knowing how to take care of Daniel and he's not giving him his medication and he's not providing a stable home, why the heck didn't he just send him back home to mom? You're saying because he didn't want to have him fly and for whatever reason he wanted to get you back to Idaho?
And then Dad told them that Daniel was being abused in my home. So then CPS was concerned, and there had been past cases where Dad told him that. And the last time that CPS came out to my home in Idaho, I told them to stop harassing me, but I let them in my home to see what was going on. I even let them talk to Daniel, and they talked to my daughters, Daniel's sisters. They're older, and even stepdad at the time. So it was unsubstantiated, and they could see a pattern of Dad and other friends of Dad calling on me.
Okay, so this has already been a pattern where he's trying to thwart your son's relationship with you.
Yeah, basically not letting him call me or Zoom me or come see me. or cooperate. It's been difficult, and the whole time I was trying to get Daniel back, he wouldn't let me have Daniel back.
So I can't, put words in Daniel Sr.'s mouth and read Dad's mind, but I have seen case after case after case where parents have weaponized CPS against the other parent. And it really is always at the detriment of the child. Always. But because they're so wrapped up in wanting to get back at this other parent, they use CPS and their child to do so, and the child is the one who ends up suffering. And I often wonder, and I haven't seen any stories about that, if the parent that did that regrets it. Do they regret it after their children suffer because of whatever is fueling them to go after the other parent? It's such a bad decision. We should never put our child in harm's way out of some kind of ill feeling towards the other parent. It's despicable. It's the lowest of the low. I think people like your mother, in fact, I did a presentation in Utah about CPS, and in comparison to Idaho, they have a whole lot more reports from family members. In Idaho, we have a whole lot of reports from schools. In Utah, it was families reporting on families. And that tells me we still have a problem with family members thinking that CPS is going to have the whole family's best interest in mind, and think that, okay, and like in the case of your mom, they'll help find my grandson and they'll help get my grandson home to my daughter. And that's what we think it's for. That's what we think it's all about. But people don't understand the ASFA funding that Bill Clinton put into place that rewards financially taking the child and rehoming them to some other family, not putting them back into the loving arms of their own family. And that's where we have the breakdown over and over and over and over. Because like any other for-profit business, it needs to make a profit. And it makes a profit when it takes a child and gives that child to another family. It doesn't make a profit when they give them back to their own loving mother, especially in another state. So I find it unfortunate, and I'm not going to say that that's what Mr. Miller was doing, but that's what it seems that he was doing, was to hurt you. He's now ultimately really hurt his son. Have you had any communication with him?
No. And that's exactly what I was feeling, what you just said. And when that hit me, there was a lot of sadness that I couldn't believe he would do that.
Right. I've seen it too many times. I don't understand it. What overcomes a person to literally throw their child under the bus in order to get at someone else? It's really unfortunate. It sounds like Daniel Jr. especially needs you with all of his special needs, and you know how to take care of those special needs.
It's taken me years to understand Daniel and his heart.
Right.
And these kids need special love. They need more love and attention than other kids. And sometimes their attention is taken up by video games or telephones or other things. And my husband helped me realize he needed more.
So the child is okay. So then you were notified that the child was put into the CPS system, right? How did that notification go?
Law enforcement called me and told me they took Daniel and handed him over to CPS. And then I kept trying to get in touch with CPS all day. And then the next day, I got a call in the evening telling me there was court in the morning. And I was still in shock and asked the courts to continue the hearing. And so they did till Monday. So on Friday, I kept trying to figure out how to get Daniel back to me. And I even asked for them to put him on an airplane. I would pay for a ticket or have my husband or a family member go get him. And they told me they were unable to release him.
And the fact of the matter is that you can't drive, right?
I haven't been driving since January of 2021.
So, due to a vaccine injury in the military, having rheumatoid arthritis, you're unable to drive. And so, because you're unable to drive, but you're saying, I can send my husband, I can pay for an airplane ticket, you're trying to find all these other solutions. So, it sounds to me that they're basically discriminating against you and not making an accommodation for your specific needs. Is that how it seems to you?
It feels that way and it looks that way. It is. And it was extremely stressful. And I just felt like they were not going to return him no matter what.
Yeah. So now the shelter care hearing happens and you're not there. Oh, when did you find out about the shelter care hearing?
A Thursday night before it happened Friday morning. And Dad didn't even know. I sent him the information that I found out. And I told him, you need to be concerned. They may take away your rights.
So did he show up?
He showed up on Monday's Zoom. It was all over Zoom.
And so then you were able to join via Zoom?
I joined via Zoom.
Okay. And then what happened?
And then they let CPS testify, and the judge cut us off and said we'd have to come back the next day.
Okay.
So then Tuesday morning, we had the hearing, and I testified, then Dad testified, and the judge let CPS keep Daniel because she needed more information. And the attorney they gave me wanted me to agree and sign that Daniel would be for 30 days with them. And I said, no, get him home.
Right. Right. And I want to be clear as people are seeing this, declaring him in imminent danger. He was declared in imminent danger with Dad, not you.
Correct.
Right. Okay, I am going to, let's see. I'm going to open this one here. This was a little bit more about Mom. This is from the licensed social worker. And we have to go through this because when I asked you questions about some of the statements she made, you really undo these statements. And I appreciate that she says on here, Mom told Dad at this time, okay, she was not able to care for Daniel. Not able to care is not quite right. You were caring very well for Daniel, but you had to go get some treatments and see a specialist, right?
Right. And when we left Idaho, I was in a travel trailer RV. And so that is my temporary living place.
Sure. But like you said, the kids all have their own room and you do all your family activities and you travel and see things. And but your husband has to drive you because you can't drive, right?
Right.
Oh, yes. Okay. And so the way that she makes it sound already, and this is what people need to understand when they read these kind of reports, you can't just read this report and take it word for word, because I have found that oftentimes there's some other story behind the words that they use. Like when they use the words that mom's unable to care, that isn't the whole story. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, she was unable to care because she was going to treatment. I mean, I guess so. But does that mean every time you go on vacation and you have somebody else watch your children that you're unable to care? That's that's a stretch, right? And I
Yes.
get it, because I actually had to go to the Mayo Clinic myself, and I had to have their grandmother come and take care of my children while I was at the Mayo Clinic. That didn't make me unable to care for my children in general. It meant that I was away for 2 weeks.
Right.
Like so many other parents, except I was going to the Mayo Clinic and suffering. Other parents are going on lovely vacations like cruises and things when they get care for their children while they're gone. So, those kinds of words, it's like you have to read it and then you have to ask the parent. You can't just go, oh, that's what it means. She's unable to care. So of course, then the child should be in foster care. No, unable to care meant she wasn't there right now. And so then it also goes on to say that you sent dad money. I love this phrase too. And I'm assuming there's something else behind this phrase: to get something figured out. Did you just send money and go figure it out?
I was sending money in all the months and food and gift cards, and there was no custody order for me to do any of that. So I was doing it because I know how costly it is to raise a teenage boy and his needs. So, yeah, I was shocked when I read this report and how they twisted words and make it fit their
Yeah.
agenda to keep him.
Yeah. Yep. I know. It's always shocking. I've read so many of these now, and it's always shocking. They never cease to amaze me at how they twist words against parents. I mean, the most horrendous one that really struck my heart was when the caseworker went into detail about how the mother was crying for her child, and the child was reaching and crying for the mother, and that there was a clear case of attachment disorder because of that. And I mean, what kind of heartless, evil person do you have to be to rip a child out of a mother's arms, and when they're screaming and reaching for each other, call it attachment disorder? I mean, that is evil. It's evil to the core.
I agree.
So okay, so then let's see. So the stepmother, okay, so they stated Daniel Jr. acts out aggressively, mostly towards the stepmother and her belongings. They stated he screams and yells, physically hurts her, destroys her belongings, spits on her, throws boogers on her phone and other items. And so was he doing these things in your care?
He didn't really do those things because the boundaries we have is that we don't overstep his personal space. And from what I understand, on a couple of occasions, Daniel was violated in his personal space, and stepmom seems to instigate a lot of interaction and frustration with Daniel. And so he was told in one instance to read a book, and then she told him to shut up and read the book, and then took it away from him. So in another, I heard that she went to go something about she got too close and she reached to grab him and scratched him. In a police report, he was scratched and harmed,
Oh,
but then they told me he was safe. So if she was such a victim and hurt by Daniel, they needed to have him in therapy to work through those things.
right, right. Or send him back to you as you requested.
Right.
Okay, so here's some of the other verbiage that I thought you should address. It says that um, mhm. Theodora refused to disclose her location. Theodora mentioned that she has 3 attorneys and that they are all based out of Boise, Idaho. When asking if she resides in Boise, she stated she did not want to disclose that information for her own safety. Theodora also stated that she will not come to Idaho to get her child and that she's unable to provide for him as she is homeless. There's a lot to unpack there. Did you tell them that you are not going to disclose your location and not disclose it because of your own safety?
Absolutely.
And okay. And so what was your reasoning for that?
I had been physically attacked and assaulted in Idaho, and there are some individuals that would like me injured worse. And so, because of that, I have not given my location to anyone, and not even my close family members, out of my own safety. So, when Dad was in Michigan and I sent Daniel to Michigan, I figured since Dad was there, Daniel would be safe, even though he wasn't with me.
Right. Right. Okay. And then you said that you will not come to Idaho to get your child and you're unable to provide for him because you're homeless. Is that correct?
I pretty much was unable to get to Idaho in the 48 hours she gave me, but it really wasn't 48 hours. It was a matter of maybe 12 hours overnight, which was impossible. And traveling does become very difficult on my joints and muscles. And the other reason was because of these individuals.
Right. And that, that makes a lot of sense. And one thing is that people should know you were also in the middle of traveling to go see your elderly mother in California, right? So you were already traveling by car, your husband driving to get you to go see your mother when this came up. It's not like you had a warning. That's, people need to understand that, sure, there's a lot of times we just have to drop things and get to the serious situation. An emergency comes up, but some people are not in a physical ability to just drop whatever they're doing and hop on a plane and get to Idaho. In fact, not only is Thea have the rheumatoid arthritis and these other things, health wise going on, she was actually on the road traveling to see her mother. So, and then having 12 hours to sort of figure out how to get to Idaho, and then with all of these other sort of things hanging over her head. So,
Well, not just that, the price of gas is outrageous right now. And then if I flew, I would need 2 tickets there and 3 tickets back and a rental car for
right,
my husband to drive, and then maybe a hotel room. And I didn't have finances to do that.
right.
So it's not like I didn't want to be there. I had constraints that I couldn't be there in the next day.
And what's crazy is that you didn't make any offense. The dad did. So to have to come up with all this money out of the blue and all of this capability out of the blue is an undue burden on you. That's what's so frustrating. I don't know if people understand either. I mean, there's a lot of people sick in America, so some people will get it when I say this. It is so expensive to have a chronic disease.
Yeah.
Nothing will wipe you out financially like a chronic disease. I
And
mean,
then, yeah, it's true. Treatments, especially alternative treatments, are quite
yes,
expensive.
yes,
And I was not able to get there fast enough, and she told me, you can get here in 48 hours. And I said, it's only 12 hours, less than 12 hours to the hearing. So I was upset when I read this report
Oh, yeah.
that she made it seem like I'm not a loving or caring mother.
Yes.
And you can ask my mom, who's elderly, and my husband. It devastated me for all weekend.
Oh,
And
of
my
course.
dog was in boarding in another state, even though it's just a few hours to my mom. My dog was at the boarding, and I would have to come back and get him and then try to make arrangements to get there. And it wasn't possible. I even called every single RV park in the area that's full to try to find a place to park and get there.
Right.
And knowing how much stress on my body it would be, I really wanted to get there.
Of course, of course. And in my mind, having been a person who needed accommodation, I understand that you needed accommodation. And how are they not giving accommodation to the mother of the child who has done no harm? That's what's crazy to me. And then I read this when I asked you about it. I was like, oh, these people. So worker Rose was notified that Theodora had posted on social media a picture of Payette Lake and that she appeared to be in McCall, Idaho. So is that the case? Were you vacationing in McCall, Idaho during this whole thing?
Unfortunately, not. And that's just the proof that he was stalking me on my social media. He had given that to them. I have been harassed on social media, and very often I take pictures when we go on vacation and I'll post them. And a couple of days before that, I posted waterfalls in Utah. And it was just a post that reminded me of last summer with Daniel, and then they tried to use it against me. So I told the CPS worker, I said, oh, great, now you're stalking me. And she got offended when I told her I'm recording this call, and she immediately became quiet.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that is just another example. And when you say he is stalking your Facebook page, you mean dad.
Yes.
And so dad then was telling this worker Rose that you were in Payette Lake. And instead of doing her due diligence and seeing that that was a post from some other, a different year altogether, she goes ahead and puts it in her report, knowing it's completely unfounded.
Right. And I mean, it's documented exactly where I was that day. And when we talked, I was in California visiting my mom, who's elderly. And of course, for 3 days, I was sad. And my husband on the fourth day said, get up, get dressed. We're taking you out to brighten your spirits. And I'm glad he did. And then I came back to Arizona for the Zoom call Monday, and then Tuesday, the continuance of that. And then Wednesday morning, when I was on the Zoom call with an attorney, I had the stroke while we were talking,
Oh,
and he witnessed it.
oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. I want to touch on this before we go too much further, is that it's obvious to this worker, Rose, she said about Daniel Sr., the dad, the excuses and stories appeared to be delusional or at least untrue. And she goes on to explain why she said that about him. So to use him as a source about where you are, like that you're in McCall, when she sees him as being delusional or untruthful, seems odd to me. This cannot be your source then. It can't be your source then for whether or not Thea is a good mother or whether or not Thea is in McCall or in Arizona. because she gives this whole list of all the ways Daniel Sr. is either delusional or at least not a truth teller. So she wants to try to have it both ways.
And I'm unfortunately, that's when I realized that my son was easy prey. Dad was having a hard time, and I don't know if Dad's stories are true or not. I haven't spoken with Dad since this happened. Dad was using CPS against me, and I think it backfired. And as much as I want to help Dad, he is not understanding what's happening.
Right. Right. He's not understanding or he's not concerned. I'm not sure.
Well, I know Dad loves Daniel, but I don't think Dad understands what Daniel needs.
Right. I mean,
Or
he,
not, and he's choosing not to help.
right. Okay, so then I was reading through these issues. They have these dates, and the concerns. Um, so I want to address some of these as well. We've already covered that Dad wasn't doing well at giving him medication, but was using over-the-counter sleep medication to sedate the child. Concerns that child was not enrolled in school. We hadn't covered that yet. Concerns for child's ongoing behavioral issues, concerns dad and stepmom stated needing help in dealing with the behaviors. Okay, concerns mom had been unable to obtain housing for 4 months. Daniel was not enrolled in school and was not taking behavioral medications. Okay, so this is a mom concern. Can you tell us about that?
So I left Idaho, and Daniel was only with me for 2 months, and he was on his medication. And when he got to Dad didn't get him medication or therapy or schooling.
And
So
so when they type this out about you, is that coming from dad?
I'm not sure about what they're saying there, but I think it meant stepmom, not mom.
Oh, okay. Well, it'd be nice if they would correct that typo if that is indeed the case, because it does make more sense. Concerns grandpa was residing in the home and previously shot out windows and harassed others. Was that in your home that was the concern?
I lived adjacent to my father-in-law, who had some questionable individuals living on the adjacent property, and they shot my bedroom window out and presented death threats. And I tried to get protection orders, but the judge said, no, we're good, we're safe, spray paint over the death threats and no more shooting windows.
Oh,
So I tried to keep my son safe as much as possible during a civil litigation over our home.
oh wow. Okay, so then I saw that part about. Oh, yeah. Daniel disclosed stepdad whipped the child, and then it says unsubstantiated. So that was back in 21. What was that about?
That we had an incident where Daniel was acting up and he tried to hit me. And so he wasn't really whipped. He was restrained. And
Right.
they told me I have the right to spank my child if I want, but I don't spank Daniel because it's not effective.
Sure. Yeah. I've seen that with children on the spectrum. So there's all these different, claims, and they're all unsubstantiated. So it sounds like this is from dad's repeated call to CPS to try to get CPS to intervene in the parent-child relationship with you and your son. Is that correct?
Yeah, it would happen over and over again. And even other family members would call that were working with dad to try to get dad full custody, that they had sent me text saying they would be witnesses for dad in order for dad to have full custody of Daniel. But that's what I don't understand, because dad wanted Daniel. I gave him custody of Daniel. I temporarily said, let's get paperwork done, and dad never did it. And then dad had all these problems with Daniel, but wouldn't send him back to me, which, if you read in that paperwork, he says once this is over with, he wants full custody of Daniel.
Oh, okay. I also want to show people. So yeah, that shows some motive there, doesn't it? I thought people should see this text saying that you want Daniel to come to you. You would pay for the plane ticket. Due to health reasons, you can't drive. So you notified them as to why you couldn't drive in that short amount of time and get to Idaho. And that your husband drives 100% of the time, that you hadn't driven in 18 months. So they were clearly notified about that situation.
Yeah, and then they told me they were unable to return him to me. And now learning how this whole process works, that there's no evidence hearing until almost 3 weeks later. And that's more time that Daniel is away. They wouldn't let him call me in the last 2 weeks, or I think it's been sorry, I'm not good with numbers. 19 days, maybe. I've only had one phone call, and that's the night I was in the hospital with the stroke. And I begged them to let me have a Zoom call with him.
Right.
He was so excited to hear from me, and he told me that he wanted to see me, and they still won't let him call me or talk to me. And the worker tells me that he's too busy, and they ask him, but he's playing video games or doing other things, and that she never returns my calls either.
You know, I've seen this every single time. Once they take a child, they begin undermining the parent-child relationship. They, in order to rehome the child, they have to start unraveling the fabric of the relationship between parent and child. And one of the ways they do that is by withholding communication and visits. It's absolutely absurd that they're using COVID as a reason that you can't have a Zoom call with your son. Do you happen to know is he symptomatic, or did he just test positive? Do you happen to know any state of health he's in?
They won't tell me anything, and I have called and sent emails after emails and phone calls. It's rotten. I know my son, and he wants to talk to me and see me. And I got angry with them and told them that they are holding my son hostage, just like my ex-husband alienating me from Daniel. And I was so angry. They're violating my rights in speaking with my son when I have primary custody and I'm in another state. And that's when I was overloaded and knew they were trying to hold him longer. And that they had him in an Airbnb.
Really? With who? What adult?
They won't tell me. All they tell me is he's in a safe location. And when I was on the phone with Daniel, he told me he was swimming and feeding around horses. And I asked him if he fed horses, and he said, no, not yet. And I asked him if he picked up poop, and he said, no, not yet. But he was happy to hear from me and he wanted to see me.
So this is kind of interesting because during the state of emergency here in Idaho, the governor used that tyrannical authority to temporarily restrict some of the visitation with parents during the pandemic, right? And so he suspended some parental rights during that time under the state of emergency. And some of those were to the benefit of the parent, like the one that says that you get to know where your child's at. These are health and welfare department rules. The one that says that parents get to know where the child is at. The one that says that you have to be allowed visitation. Now, it sounds to me like the department is continuing to operate as if those rules have still been suspended, but they have not. They are no longer suspended because the state of emergency has been rescinded. So I think they need to be reminded of that those rules were only temporarily in force.
Right. And they could give me a Zoom call with him, no matter if he's in quarantine or not.
Oh, yeah.
And I know that from talking to some experts in genetics, and I had Daniel tested very young, he could actually have side effects of COVID and having blood clot and a stroke himself. And so my rheumatoid arthritis didn't get really bad until after I had COVID, and they put me on hydroxychloroquine for my rheumatoid arthritis. So I know that they're using this as a reason for me not to see Daniel. And I already knew that in my heart that they would use this as a time for him to think that I don't want to see him. And that's not true. I do.
Of course you do. Of course you do. And you're right. I mean, your suspicions are correct, I would imagine, just based on all of the stories that I've heard from parents and even older children who've been able to tell their stories afterwards, that that's exactly what they start doing, is thwarting the relationship between the child and parent by saying things like, you know, if your mom wanted to see you, she'd be here. Or if your mom wanted to talk to you, she'd call, and things like that. And then saying the things to you that they're saying, like, well, we asked him if he wanted to talk to you, but he was so busy, he just couldn't. And that's the way they start unraveling the fabric of the family.
And you know what hurts is that in an independent report that I'll send you, Daniel didn't claim any abuse, but his dad reminded him in the interview that he was hurt by my husband, which is not true. So I'm upset that CPS had that report, but yet is still keeping me from my son, even though I'm in another state.
Right. Right. Well, I think you might want to remind them that the rules that they're enforcing regarding COVID no longer apply because the state of emergency has been rescinded. So they need to start allowing access to and also location. That was one of the things that they lined out during the state of emergency, was that parents didn't get to know the child's location. Well, sorry, state of emergency has been lifted.
Okay.
So you do get to know. So that's part of their department rules. So I think they need to be reminded that the state of emergency rules no longer apply, and that you need to know where your child is. So, okay, what does it look like for you to travel now with the stroke and the arthritis and the therapies you need and the husband needing to drive you and all these things? Like, what does it look like now for you to try to get here to handle this situation?
Well, the doctor said no flying because of the pressurization
Ugh.
and with the stroke, and no traveling recommended for 30 days, or if not feeling well, because you can have, and they suspect me to have another stroke within that time frame, because that's the pretty normalcy of having a stroke. Usually you have a worse one within 30 days. And because of the rheumatoid arthritis, I'm at a much greater risk of having another stroke. So some days I feel like I'm just waiting, and other days, like today, I feel stronger and trying to communicate better, and then trying not to stress in the situation. Traveling on my body, and my body would not be good right now, but I don't want to put myself in greater risk because I know Daniel needs me,
Of course.
and I know that this is temporary.
Right. Of course.
But I don't like the process, and there needs to be reform and changes in some of this legislation put in place, especially some criteria, in my opinion, it being risk. Is this child at risk with one parent or the other? Or
Right.
I was dumbfounded when the CPS worker told me she's only the worker that separates families. And my heart sank, because I don't need to be separated from Daniel. I need to be reunited with Daniel. With all the abuse that he's tolerated with my ex and stepmom and what they've done to alienate him from me, the CPS worker was just continuing. And the emails I get from her are shocking. I just am overwhelmed to think that Daniel thinks he's on a summer vacation, and the realization when it sets in for him that he is really separated from his mom and dad, or mom and dad, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm searching. You sent me an email with the governor's. Where did you send that to me? The governor's response.
Oh, on text.
Oh, you sent it.
So, yeah, I was writing my congressman and contacting legislation and trying to find advocates to help in this situation, because until you're in it, you don't realize the ramifications of how serious this can be. And I was reaching out for help with the lieutenant governor, and I got a response that blew my mind.
Oh, this is the lieutenant governor's office. Oh my goodness. Yeah. So this is directed to you, dear Miss Harn. Thank you for contacting the lieutenant governor's office. Your health issues are unfortunate, and it is a blessing that your special needs son has someone to care for him. I pray for your continued improvement and well-being. Michelle Hamilton, Director, Strategy and um, cons- constituent service, Lieutenant Governor's office. I mean, how did that make you feel? I'm going to email this to myself so I can pull it up on screen and let people see it. How did that make you feel?
I was shocked. I was trying to ask for help and put me in touch with some advocates, and I can walk with a cane. My left side is affected, and I can talk and speak my mind, not as fast as before, but I can relay my wishes. And I have support here. So I was shocked that she would even suggest that I would be okay with CPS caring for him.
I'm actually pretty shocked as well because she's been someone a lot of people have gone to for help. And she has seemed to be, caring about such things. Um, let's see if I can. What's this right here? Okay. I want to send. Did I get the attachment on there? Yes. So I really do want people to see it for themselves because I was, pretty taken aback by the cold response to a mother who has lost her son for absolutely no founded reason.
And
Um,
I've even sent CPS ideas of having somebody fly in and escort him back, having a friend that's a law enforcement officer pick him up for me. All these options, and they're not willing. And unfortunately, I think their motivation is financial.
I think so too, based on history and based on the way their financial system is set up. I think so too. Okay, I'm going to share this screen. Okay, there it is. There it is. Thank you for contacting the Lieutenant Governor's office. Your health issues are unfortunate, and it is a blessing that your special needs son has someone to care for him. How cold is that?
I was shocked because I know that right now Daniel's needs probably are not still being met. I don't know if I don't know anything. They won't share if he's getting therapy, if he's having the right medications. And that's a huge concern because I did special testing to make sure that with our liver issues that he can metabolize certain medications. So if they're giving him the wrong ones, it could be detrimental to him.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and I just I'm sharing because there are so many medical concerns for me for Daniel that no one would really know unless they sat down with me. And I even sent CPS ideas. If Daniel's behavior is out of control, please, do this, give him these techniques, have him remember certain things that my husband and I have taught him and therapy has taught him. We even had community therapy come to our house and work with Daniel 2 days a week or work with him in the community 2 days a week to help him become more social and more active and finding ways to cope in stressful situations.
Wow.
So I there's so many concerns that I do have that are rightfully my concerns, and also that CPS never responded to how Daniel could interact with others better if he has behavioral issues when he's there.
Right. And so they're not even communicating with you on what's best for him when clearly you know what's best for him. I bet you anything they're relying on some new doctors that don't know his whole medical history like you do or the doctors he's been going to, but they've got to go to the doctors that are on the payroll. So those are the doctors they're going to go to and start from scratch. Everything that you've done and poured into him and the foundation you've laid, you've already done it. And didn't you say that he gained quite a bit of weight while he's there?
Yeah, we noticed when he came back from his dad's, he was gaining weight, but dad was also giving him soda, which my husband says no soda, and I say no soda.
Mhm.
Exercise, 2 salads a day, green vegetables, We were finding other things that he was not getting, which was a concern, and he gained quite a bit of weight. So that was one of our major concerns in making sure that Daniel was getting his needs met.
Right, for sure. Okay, so it sounds like, are you wanting to have some attorneys start working on your case on your behalf that are here while you're needing to wait at home and make sure that you're healthy and strong to be able to come here? Am I understanding that right?
Yes, and unfortunately, I learned during this process that when they give you someone to defend yourself, it's actually a prosecutor that's paid through state funding, and everyone else is getting paid through that funding. And so I wanted to be able to raise some money to help Daniel get the best possible lawyer to help him get home and to advocate how this organization works.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And that's why I say that you're smarter than most parents they try to pick on, because you've got their number. I mean, you see what they're up to. You're checking out the funding and understanding the motive. And you're exactly right. If the attorney who's supposed to represent you is getting paid by the same machine that gets more money by taking your child, that attorney is not motivated to help you save your child. That attorney is financially motivated to help be a part of removing your child and rehoming your child to a new family, because that's how the big bucks come rolling in. So it's worse than unfortunate. It's criminal. It's heartless. It's evil, the way the system has been set up. And if anybody understands Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, and the Clinton Foundation, they might have an understanding of why so many children go missing when in foster care every year. It's disgusting. So if you think that CPS is the safest place or foster care is the safest place, it isn't. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't good people, especially foster parents, who are trying their best. I've interviewed several foster parents who say the more they advocate for the child, the quicker they'll have the child removed from them and given to some other foster parent that won't advocate for the child. And those are the good-hearted foster parents who are trying so hard to do something good in a rotten system. And they exist. So please don't get me wrong that I'm saying the whole thing is rotten. The way that it's set up is rotten, and good people exist who are trying to do good things. But for the most part, they get burnt out and exhausted, because you realize that the system is so stacked against families and so stacked to take children and rehome them. And let me tell you, there is evidence out there. You just have to go digging around online. In fact, I present it in another one of my presentations on here about CPS knocking at the door. So you can go watch that video if you want to see what I point to as evidence of what I'm about to say. They did some statistics, and there were more children who had been trafficked from foster care than not from foster care. So meaning when they would recover, and listen, I'm not a huge, gigantic Trump fan by any means. There's things he did that I liked, and there's things he did that I didn't like. But one of the things that they did do under his administration is recover children from human trafficking. And what they found is the percentage of children was more than half when it was children who were from foster care being trafficked. So the notion that children are safer in foster care is incorrect. Now, I'm not saying there are not truly abused children. There are. There are truly abused children. And then you have to ask yourself, why does foster care and CPS not help those children? Because those are the ones we hear about, right? And we think, well, man, if CPS was just doing their job and taking those kids, then that child would have been saved. So why do we hear about those children who are not getting help through our foster care system and CPS? But we hear about children like Daniel who don't need state intervention, who it seems to me needs to go home to mom. Well, I'm about to drop a hard truth bomb that hurts really bad to hear it. But the fact of the matter is, it's because you can't get as much money from those children who have been abused and truly neglected. You can't rehome them like you can a sweetheart kid who's been well taken care of. I'm going to let that sink in for a minute because it hurts really bad. And it's a truth that I wanted to not be true because I don't want to be funding that. But it is the truth, and the stats show it's true. So now, friends, let's talk about how we can help reunite Daniel Jr. to his mother, Thea Harn. Now, I just want it to be said, like I said from the beginning, I don't know you as well as I know some other parents. So I say all this, without knowing you a long time. Like I have baby Cyrus's family. I mean, I could advocate from them as a close personal family friend. But other parents I don't know quite as well. I only have to look at the facts, and I'm looking at the facts, everything that you sent me. And I'm going, why is this boy not being reunited with his mother? There's nothing here that says to me, Daniel Jr. can't go home to his mother. Nothing.
You know what's sad, Misty, is I've been very open and honest with CPS, with the state, about everything that's taken place. I have documented every step of the way. I have shared intimate emails between the situation with my ex-husband and Daniel's needs, and details of how we interact, and also truth every step of the way of this process. And they have this information, but yet they still are alienating me from Daniel. They still are allowing Dad to abuse this system when they could really be helping some child that really needs their help.
Amen to that. Amen to that. So what you're asking is to raise $7,000, and that is for your attorney's retainer. And Christine, who I've interviewed before, and you can go to the YouTube Health Freedom Idaho and see what she's doing after her child was taken, and he's now over 18, back home with mom. We know she was found completely not guilty. They were reunited after almost a year of being separated for absolutely no reason. And she had a really good attorney. And you're wanting the same attorney, right?
Yeah, I was on the Zoom call with him when I had the stroke, and we were on for about 30 minutes, and I knew he had to be Daniel's and my attorney to be able to it's not comprehensible to me to understand all this, but he is fighting for those, and there's so much reform that I see needs to be done in assessing situations such like this.
Oh, I agree with you. I think if we really want to do something good, we've got to remove ASFA, because that's the funding mechanism. And no matter what we try to put in place to try to protect parents, they're going to try to find a workaround in order to get that funding coming. I mean, they have to do it. You even see in Idaho during COVID so when you back up, you look at the chart at how many children they're taking. It's like 1,200 to 1,400 children a year. And it's like steadily increasing, and it kind of adjusts as to who's reporting, that kind of adjusts. Well, in COVID 2020, when they weren't going to school, the number one reporting, which is from schools, dropped because kids were not in school. So they had to find a way to make up those numbers like any other private business, for-profit business. So what they did was they started taking children from homeless parents. And that's how they tried to make up those numbers. Then when COVID restrictions are removed and now they're getting more reports from the school, they stop taking as many homeless children.
I did not know that. It's disheartening to know what I don't know yet, that I'm learning. And in this situation, I see why. And let me share with you, in 2009, when Daniel had the reaction to that vaccine, and Duke Medical Center in North Carolina had to inject all this stuff in him to open his airway so he could breathe and more, they told me that they've never seen that before. And I came to find out that they had.
Oh.
And I became an advocate to be informed in education on vaccines from that experience. And I exposed in 2009 Blue Cross Blue Shield giving pediatricians bonuses for children who were vaccinated on schedule. And I was absolutely irate. Now, mind you, my goal was to educate parents on what they're giving their children. I wasn't so anti, I was more on educating people and taking know your risks before you have an adverse reaction. Because when I had my reaction in the military, it was documented and they knew. So when I had the anthrax vaccination and it caused more damage, I knew that Daniel could have an adverse reaction, and I took that risk on him. So I feel like it's my moral obligation to protect him in this arena, especially medical and parental, because I am his natural birth mother. And I love my son. And I do want him to come home. And I don't want them to use my location or my medical history or my belief system against me.
Yeah. And that's fair. You're not asking for something outlandish. That's fair and right and just. So friends, we need to help Thea and her son get reunited. Please donate. Her daughter has made this GoFundMe page. It looks like so far we've got $400 on there. This is really your first time speaking out about your situation, right?
Yeah, I didn't want to share, but something in me yesterday, I wasn't going to, but I woke up and I thought about not knowing where Daniel is, not knowing if he's okay, because they said he had tested positive for COVID. And I felt obligated to let other families know exactly what could possibly happen.
Yes. And I thank you for that, because so many people are scared. They're scared to talk about it. They're scared when they don't have their children what the ramifications will be. And, when they have your most precious, which is your child, there's nothing more precious in your life than your own child. They really have you, and they know they have you. But in this case, I understand you need representation. You need a good attorney, one that's not being paid by the same department that stands to make money by rehoming the child. You're absolutely right, and you're on the right track. And I appreciate that you didn't sign certain documents that would then get you into a system you don't want to be in. That was so smart. So really, the next step is we've got to get a retainer to these attorneys. So, friends, please go to this GoFundMe page and donate. I will be donating $100 today, and I hope everybody can put in $100. We'll be there in no time. If you can only do $10, Trust me, $10 adds up. Every $10 adds up. So whatever you can do, and there's some people out there that can do $1,000. There's some people out there that can do all 7. And don't think this doesn't affect you. It's at Thea's door right now. And when is it going to be at your door? You have no idea when somebody from a school, somebody at a grocery store, a neighbor, a church member, a family member can call CPS and have your life totally turned upside down and wrecked. And I'm speaking from experience of all the people that I have interviewed. It's not an outlandish tale. And these were all good parents. I know you want to find some reason to say it was justified, but there's so many stories where it is not justified. This is a business that is out of control. Under the covering of the Health and Welfare Department. So, Thea, God bless you, friend.
Thank you so much, Misty. I know that it's my calling to care for Daniel and my God-given demand. And I pray that we can help him. And I can only imagine how he's feeling.
Yeah.
He's probably scared and he doesn't understand this process.
You know, even children who are not on the spectrum don't understand. They are
True.
to be confused. And so then if you take a child, you know, who needs more care and help, it's definitely overwhelming. And it is abuse. It's absolutely abuse. It's government sanctioned, paid for abuse. And it cannot be tolerated. And the way that we don't tolerate that and we stand up and fight back is to help you get an attorney. So I hope we see those numbers going up, friend. You will be in my prayers, dear, and your precious son also in my prayers. And I hope we start seeing those numbers going up so you can immediately call those attorneys and say, let's go. When is the date of your next hearing?
August 1st is pre-conference trial, and then August 4th. So I need to move faster than we have been and just meet that goal, because that's just the start. It
Oh,
doesn't, it's just the beginning.
we have no time to spare. No time to spare. Okay. Well, we'll get this video up and out. Be well, everybody. Hug your kids. Hold them tight. Pray covering over your family and your home. And please donate what you can to Thea and her son Daniel. Take care.